Hey everybody, welcome back to Cool's Book Reviews. Today we're going to be checking out the tragic story of the Empress of Ireland by Logan Marshall. Now this was the book of choice due to the recent anniversary of the sinking of the Empress of Ireland, which sank on May 29th, 1914. Just a couple years after the Titanic and of course a few years before the Britannic and a year before the Lusitania. So of course, definitely thought this was worth checking out. The Empress of Ireland is a super tragic story that really kind of gets lost to time, It's right after the Titanic and right before World War One. And even though it was a very large loss of life, the majority of the people on board did perish, unfortunately. It really doesn't get the, I think, publicity that a lot of these other more famous shipwrecks get. So, always think it's very good to try to keep history alive and try to get you guys interested in some of these stories. But before I get any further into my thoughts on the book, let's actually take a look at the physical book itself. Now, as you can see, mine is one of the older editions. You can get a more updated one that actually is a little bit longer, at least according to Goodreads, but I like to get a classic when I'm able to. Up top you can see it says The Tragic Story, and then you get a picture of the Empress of Ireland, and then you see the rest of the title of the Empress of Ireland. And then there you'll get the author, Logan Marshall, edited by William H. Tannum IV. On the spine you do see the title again, The Tragic Story of the Empress of Ireland, by Logan Marshall. Now the back of this book is super cool, mainly because it is a collection of different newspapers and photographs or postcards just pertaining to the Empress of Ireland and the sinking. So you can see up top, Empress carries almost 1,000 passengers to the bottom of the St. Lawrence River. Right there you get a little picture of the Empress of Ireland. Right here you see bringing the dead to Quebec. Right there is the Storstad, which is the ship that struck the Empress. So yeah, really neat just design. And I think this is a really interesting way to get people to look at the book. I mean, you look at the back, you get kind of just brief snippets, and you're like, I gotta figure out more about this. So yeah, I'd actually like to see more of this in current books. Okay, so with the pictorial section at the end of the book, it does stretch out to 232 pages. Like I said, the last 30 or 40 pages is just pictures, which is super cool. I don't want to open it too much because I'm afraid with the age and the condition of the binding it will fall apart. So I'm just trying to be kind of careful as I flip through, but you can see lots of cool pictures. That was Lord Mercy, which we've talked about a couple times with the Lusitania and Titanic. The very last page of just text is 187. And as you can see as we flip through, it is mainly text, though pictures will pop in from time to time, as well as a little bit of news articles. But let's get to my thoughts on the book. Alright, so like I said, there is a more recent edition with additional material, but this in itself is a more recent edition of a 1914 publishing. This one was published in 1972 with some additional editing and just a little bit more added to it. So that's why you see an additional edited by at the bottom. Now as far as the editing and the story and the timeline, it does kind of jump around and feel a bit jumbled. Now, having read books from the early 1900s or maybe similar books that collect, stories, it does feel very much of the time. So it wasn't the biggest thing to me as far as inconvenience or man, why didn't they do it this way? But when I was logging stuff on Goodreads, definitely saw that that was a big complaint. And I can definitely understand it's not streamlined. Stuff feels kind of jumbled or out of place, so maybe with a little bit more tweaking, who knows? Maybe the more current one has a little bit better, put together editing or whatever. But yeah, it is a collection of stories. A lot of these stories are survivor stories, which are just harrowing in itself because, the ship obviously is terrifying if it's sinking, more terrifying when it's super dark and cloaked in fog. But also it's sinking super quickly. It pretty much flips on its side really, really quick. Within like 5-6 minutes, it's on its side. It sits and kind of flounders for a little bit before dipping under the waves in about 14 minutes, thus creating the large loss of life because people just didn't have the time. When we talk about like Titanic, it was over 2 hours that it took for that ship to sink, and it still had a huge loss of life. A lot of people got either killed by the collision itself or just killed by drowning as soon as their cabins were full of water because it was a massive, massive hole in the side of the ship. So we definitely get some stories, and I think the best and strongest portion of the book is the survivors' stories. Again, it just paints some pictures that you really don't get from books that don't include them. Books that, yeah, maybe they've researched and they've taken these accounts and they fit it in and weave it into a narrative. Yeah, it may get the point across, but when you're reading it firsthand, really gets the point across. I mean, it's just a terrifying experience, and you can see a little bit of what people enjoyed before the ship sank. Not too much, not like when we talked about that Lusitania Deadwake book. They really didn't have time. They didn't even really know the ship. They had only been out, a night? And then it gets struck in the fog, and of course it does go into who's at fault, who's not at fault. And like I was talking about when we were flipping through the pictures, Lord Mercy's brought up. I mean, this guy is just like a name you're going to know if you're researching any of these famous shipwrecks, because once it comes time for an inquiry, he's leading the charge. So, hey, maybe he's somebody that we do need to research a little bit more and just talk about him personally, because he's come up with tons. So maybe at this point, we got to. Like I said, the editing and feeling a bit jumbled, I can see where people might not like it. At times it did feel a little sloggy, and I would like a little bit more cohesive, maybe, narrative to it. There's a very fine balance between too much detail and too little detail, and I think this strides a little towards the too little. It's not Deadwake where there was sections where you could have edited out. I just feel like this one could have taken a good editor to restructure the book, maybe make it just feel more like a narrative, and maybe add some more narration to it. Don't take anything out. There's a lot of first-hand accounts, and we need to preserve those. Obviously, with the passing of time, this shipwreck happened 111 years ago. So, at this point, no one is around to talk about it. It's very important to preserve history. I know while reading on Goodreads, and maybe this is just more the updated, newer version, people were saying it talked too much about the Titanic. I really didn't see it. Yeah, the Titanic was mentioned here and there, but again, the Titanic, when this book was originally published in 1914, had just sunk a couple years prior. So I can understand why it would have been included here and there. Personally, for me, it wasn't like it was overwhelming or the Titanic took precedence over the Empress of Ireland. It didn't feel that way at all. The Empress of Ireland and the Empress of Britain definitely get the limelight here, and much deserved. Is this the best book on the Empress of Ireland? I'm not sure. As time goes on, I hope to bring more of these for you guys, so we'll find out. Overall, I would say this one's probably about a 5.5 out of 10. For me, it's not a terrible read, and I really do appreciate the first-hand, descriptions of what was happening, what was going on. Again, very, very harrowing scenes. Just, it could have used a little bit stronger of a narrative. After this one, I've gone into 2 fictional books that are, highly regarded, highly acclaimed, and they just flow really, really well. So it has made me kind of look back as I start to rate this and review it. And I'm trying to not let that influence me, but you can go to other ship books and, I don't know, it feels like I want more. So we are still on the quest to find the best book on the Empress of Ireland. If you guys have recommendations, definitely put it in the comments below. But I still do recommend if you can pick this up, especially if you can get a really nice edition like this one. I love having older editions of books. I think it's really, really neat. Especially, they just look so nice, and there's a lot of care and stuff put into these old editions, where now, still a lot of care, but you really have to go kind of those boutique labels, like a Folio Society or something like that, to get a really, really nice one. But yeah, 5.5 out of 10. I think that's pretty fair. we'll see as I read more. Maybe it'll dip down lower. I don't know. But for now, guys, go out there, read, learn about this. Like I said, it's just a very tragic event where 1,012 people lost their lives. So definitely want to remember them. But until next time, guys, for more Cool's book reviews, click that link to your left. For more about us here at Cool's Paranormal, click that link to your right. And don't forget to hit the like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, have you read the tragic story of the Empress of Ireland? Tell us in the comments below.